Hi, this is Steph, and you're listening to WNHHLP 103.5 FM, broadcasting from New Haven, Connecticut.
As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission, I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain, keep on working, open curtains. Haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. Whoa. I'm never gonna give up, fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my road. Lights, camera, action, I'm ready to go. I'm never gonna give up, fall down, I just gotta get up, hey. Yeah, this is my road.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHHLP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.
Good morning, everyone. Harry, can you hear me okay? Because I'm not getting as much feedback as I normally get.
I hear you.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. And again, I always want to have that technical can you hear me kind of thing going on, because it's important as folks listen and tune in with either Facebook Live or kind of listen to our melodious voices, Harry's melodious voice, mine, whether you like it or not. But we have another melodious voice that's going to join our tribe this morning, Robert Goodrich from RACE. RACE stands for what again?
It stands for Radical Advocates for Cross-Cultural Education.
Say that again.
Radical Advocates for Cross-Cultural Education.
I love that, because acronyms are important, but also what the acronyms stand for is important. Robert's we were just chatting before we went on air. It's been kind enough to kind of join me this morning. There was a conference at the Yale Law School, again, not at the Yale History Department or Sociology Department or Medical Department or even Psychiatry Department. But there was a conference at the Yale Law School, the 20th conference actually, on something called critical race theory. I say something called critical race theory because that is the academic term, critical race theory. But you think of, what does critical race theory have to do with law? Law is colorblind. We've seen the statue of the lady with the mask on so that she can render justice impartially. But how does race impact the legal jurisprudence, the legal system? And quite frankly, even at the Yale Law School, which is, let's admit it, one of the top three, some recent studies have talked about Yale being the number one law school in the United States, if not the world. Obviously, Harvard and Yale's law school are kind of the ones that are always on people's the tip of their tongues. But at the Yale Law School for the 20th annual Critical Race Theory Conference, we're going to kind of walk you through some of it. Robert had a chance to attend. He's been kind enough to kind of share with me some of his insights and to give us some of the highlights of not only the keynote address, but also some of the various panels and the 20th annual Critical Race Theory Conference at Yale, and not just Yale University, but at the Yale Law School. Robert, welcome.
Thank you, Tom. It's good to be here again.
And again, I'm glad he mentioned I'm glad you mentioned, Robert, that this is not your first time, because you're going to have to come back a third time. Every guest, the third time will be the charm. And I say that because I'm blessed to have newsmakers on the show. So and he's up to a lot, and the organization that he's involved with is really, really critical, and it's not going to go away in the next few months. We're going to have the need for it increasingly. So the Critical Race Theory Conference at Yale, this was the 20th one. Robert, you attended the keynote. Share with me about so we're going to talk about the keynote as well as some of the panels.
Yes, it's my third Critical Race Conference at Yale. They have it every 2 years. And just a shout out to Adrian and Katara James, who were the organizers, the law students that did an excellent job of corralling academics and scholars to be in one place at the right time and to provide insight and their professional experiences in regards to a very important issue. So thanks to the Yale Law School.
Perfect.
So yeah, Gerald Torres would be considered the conference lead and opened up the conference. Gerald wrote a famous book called The Miner's Canary, and he's really a prolific critical race theorist and legal scholar and practitioner. So he's one of my nerd heroes. So it was really exciting to actually meet him in person and listen to him speak about important issues. So he really started off the conference with a question that was intriguing, and I'll do my best to paraphrase, but he led the conference off with, how do we critique without becoming part of the way of knowing we are critiquing? Which is how do we change a system by working within it and making sure that there's significant enough change that we work away from the oppressive strategies and tactics of the theories of legal liberalism and white ways of knowing here in the United States. So, and he was very focused on driving home the point that that critique is not synonymous with negativity.
Okay.
And that it's important, as he relayed his story about how he wrote this book, The Miner's Canary, with his co-author, that they had terrific debates all the time while they were writing it, and they challenged each other. And that was a way for them to build community and solidarity around a very important issue.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth, because again, I was there, but was he also saying, or did you interpret that critique, that he was saying that critique is not submission?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. It's very important to understand that it's critique on top of everything we do.
Okay.
And that allows us to actually start the process of liberation.
And from your standpoint, and again, I know you're not a lawyer, so I don't want to put you on the spot in that regard. But again, this critical race theory was again held in the archives, the confines, the sacred space, and I'm half pun intended, of the Yale Law School. But why was that even so important as a keynote to jump off with that thought probe?
Well, I thought for two reasons. I thought that one, it automatically grabbed the audience and saying that we're not going to be able to sit back and relax and just listen to the pundits, that this was going to be interactive, and that also we were going to see the critical race theorists and practitioners rigorously debate each other about important issues that are happening in our society today.
Great. And lawyers. So, I mean, obviously we know was, I guess, Friday, if you were having a cup of coffee somewhere in the United States, and particularly if you were having a cup of coffee or attempting to go to a men's room or something in Philadelphia, so we can see how this critical race theory might even kind of impact our daily lives 24/7, 365.
Yes. Starbucks needs a break. They need a timeout.
But so what did he make? And again, his co-author, I believe, was Lonnie Guarnier.
Yes.
And again, some of you may remember Lonnie, that under the Clinton administration, Yale Law School graduate, by the way, and teaches at Harvard, and also has taught at the University of Pennsylvania. She was nominated, I believe, for the Attorney General position. And Lonnie, during her academic days and during her student days, wrote an article rather about essentially that maintained that white people will not vote for black people, and that it was a law journal, and so a law journal article that she wrote, and that was kind of used as a reason for really applying pressure to Clinton to withdraw the nomination of Lonnie for Attorney General. But I digress. But so the title of the book, again, because again, this is going to kind of an academic discussion, but people might want to follow up, kind of research things. So the title of the book It's The Miner's Canary: Enlisting Race, Resisting Power, and Transforming Democracy. And was Guarnier there, by the way? She was not. She was not? Okay. She was unable to make it, even though she was planned and scheduled to be there. Okay. That life kind of throws its tricks at us sometimes. What else do you say before we go to some of the other panels that kind of provokes you? Well, what was very provoking is Professor Torres got into some more of the technical aspects of his experience, including talking about writing in scholarly journals and practicing law here in the United States. He simplified it for us and said we should be seeking to be louder than words, that we should be focusing not on the words on paper or what guides us through the legal system or our institutions, that when we take action, we should try to sort of transcend
the words that we're so comfortable with using in describing what it is that we're experiencing. So,
and in your standpoint, what was he saying specifically to some of the aspiring lawyers and the law students in the audience?
well, I think the question being of the conference is sort of what would the future of critical race theory be?
Okay.
And then that's sort of substantiated for me anyways, not that I had any doubt, but that critical race theory is the device to be used today to transform our legal system, our institutions.
So to write laws, to interpret laws, to enforce laws, or everything?
Well, I think when we think about critique, we talk about deconstruction. And at the top of critical race theory, if we're not deconstructing what it is that is in front of us, whether it's individual relationships and or our relationships with institutions, we become complicit with the daily activities and the malaise of white supremacy and racism.
So again, and I'm not here to put words in your mouth, but are you saying that a law book, if I had a law book right here for us to leaf through, to look through a particular statute, to look through a particular law that was passed, to look through a particular Supreme Court decision, we could analyze it from a critical race theory standpoint?
I think you would be able to use the tenets of critical race theory to analyze how it is that it has a particular law either creates oppression or sustains what's currently going on in terms of the oppressive structures that we experience on a daily basis.
Boy, I mean, that's impressive. Again, you're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show, and if you've just joined us, we're discussing the 20th conference that was held at Yale University, the law school in particular, a few weeks ago, maybe about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and Robert Goodrich was kind enough to kind of be there and to kind of give us, to kind of unpack it for us from his perspective as well as from some of the audience members' perspective. I'm glad you mentioned, Robert, that it was the 20th, but it's held every 2 years, which means 40 years ago, this critical race theory issue was introduced.
Hey, I'm not a mathematician,
but
yes.
every 2 years
Yes.
is the 20th. So that's impressive again for people to know critical race theory, because we know about implicit bias now that you hear in the common language for really repeatedly over the last year, and it started a few years ago. And we know about the mass incarceration with various books, but critical race theory, if you kind of research it, I think you can kind of see that the offspring of this critical race theory that, again, was kind of institutionalized 40 years ago. There's been offsprings in different and additional derivations, but also various connections. But again, you're saying that the legal system, regardless of how we define it, whether in the minute detail, in the micro or in the macro, that race and color and class has impacted and affects how we even implement laws. Is that?
Absolutely. And I think for us to, as citizens of any community, to think that laws and policies or regulatory wording is not built upon white supremacist language, because that's the history of America, that we would be fools to believe that there's any chance for liberation and freedom from.
Boy, I do appreciate you saying that. We hear often on the radio, and again, one of the beauties of WNHH and the New Haven Independent, even just the name New Haven Independent, what Robert and I are expressing does not express the views of Paul Bass, New Haven Independent, or Harry, but we have the license, and I use that term literally through the FCC and Slow Power station, to really be outspoken and free with our language and our points of view. So again, I always like to take the opportunities, Robert, to kind of give a shout out to Paul Bass and the New Haven Independent crew and WNHH in terms of providing this platform, because as we know, media often is instrumental in how we perceive societal structures, societal expression, societal censorship, societal creativity, and it's a pleasure to kind of be here with you this morning. One or two other points that you may have made before we go to perhaps some of the other workshops.
Well, I think that it's very important that we take critical race theory in terms of a white middle-class male as a way to reimagine the world in which I engage, to critically take a look at the way I'm situated with my personal relationships, with schools, with police officers, with the Board of Aldermen, with Congress, and then go back and say, and develop a cognizance of my whiteness and white privilege. And from that turning point, becoming racially cognizant of my identity, I can then go ahead and fully appreciate, and even at times take the challenge of trying to erase some of the things that currently exist in our systems. So it's just as important not just for people of color to be aware and to practice the tenements of critical race theory, but it's extremely important for white people. And that's one of the things at Race that we've constructed is a racial competency or cultural competency training program that starts with developing racial consciousness for white people and understanding their racialized identity.
So for all folks, I mean, if you're walking and breathing and want to be a contributing citizen to society, and again, you're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show, and Robert Goodrich is with us, co-founder of Race. And so let's jump a little bit to as a sidebar to what you're involved with in terms of race, and then we'll come back to some of the other panels as well, because you kind of, I think, indicated what some of your passion is and why attending this 20th conference on critical race theory was not just an academic exercise, but it really was part of ammunition and information and energy in terms of what you do 24/7, 365.
No, it's very important to recognize these type of events that are exemplars, and really thanks to Yale and the good people here in New Haven that they have a lot of these types of events. It's a way for activists and advocates and even agitators to sort of get refueled and to actually do some self-care and to prevent the cycles of abuse of having to deal with the fatigue of going up against a system that is very belligerent and unresponsive to our efforts.
So tease us a little bit, Robert, about Race and what you're up to, and how how you're building that community and that cohesion and the synergy and just the inspiration and the re-energizing of folks that want to fight the good fight.
So let me shout out Shantae Campbell and now Arlene Garcia, my two co-founders. They're the deep thinkers, and they're the part of the organization that is really the backbone.
Yes.
And I carry out their directives.
All right. Amen.
So,
amen.
Well, we take a very simple approach where we do match data analysis to the socio-cultural phenomena that we know that exist in schools in our community, and then promote solutions, and often sometimes not radical ones, but to change the way that schools interact with students and parents and even the educators. So we focus on 3 issues. We want to build racial congruency in the classrooms. We want more black and brown teachers in the classroom. We want to eliminate exclusionary discipline policies, so no school suspensions. Only for the most violent offenses would we accept the use of out-of-school suspension. And then we also want to be able to make sure that teachers are provided with the best type of professional development that provides them with the complexities to deal with the modern urban student, and also to project liberatory frameworks, anti-racist education styles in classrooms, as opposed to the traditional white Eurocentric views of banking and testing, etc. So,
well, that's good, and you know that's well, but tease us a little more. I believe you had an event. Was it November, December, and so tease us with some of the things that make us feel bad about some of the things we missed, and then some of the things we can kind of get involved with moving forward.
So, besides our agitation, because we're very confrontational when we see oppression or we see really things that are vibrantly unaddressed and have long existed in our school district in Waterbury, we also want to provide our community a sense of wholeness. So back in December, we decided to get together with a couple of our partners, Chimay Morales-James from My Reflection Matters.
I think you have her book here.
Yeah,
I think I saw it.
She just co-authored the ABCs of the Black Panther Party, but she has a long career that she's been working on in providing culturally responsive education through NYU and now here back in Connecticut. And then our friend Kate Marcel from Lotus Counseling. So where we got together teachers, parents, and students for 2 days at Naugatuck Valley Community College. And we focused on advocacy, learning anti-racist educational strategies, and also providing them an opportunity to learn a little bit about how do we take care of ourselves through wellness and meditation.
And do you hope to kind of, was that a one-off, as they say, or do you have upcoming events either for the remainder of 2018 or even into 2019?
No, really the third leg of Race is to build community. It's something that we haven't been really good at. So part of what we have dedicated ourselves to do is make sure we provide community events, learning opportunities, and interactions, not necessarily at this grand of a scale all the time, but we plan to make it a routine effort 3 or 4 times a year to do outreach and to provide services and or just our support for our community.
So if folks want to find out and kind of connect and contribute and support, how would they go about that?
Hey, we can go to our website, which is racce.net, race.net. We're up on Facebook and Twitter as well at racewtby. But we have a business model where we don't rely upon necessarily donations.
Okay.
But if you or grants, we're a self-funded small organization, and but if you do want to support us, you can make a tax-exempt donation at race.net.
Perfect.
So we would certainly outline how we would use your money very specifically and have.
And again, I love the name of your organization, and so the acronym stands for
Radical Advocates for Cross-Cultural Education.
Perfect. So you're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show, and we're talking about the critical race theory conference that was held at Yale University Law School, and how it really applied to aspiring lawyers, to students there at the law school, but also gets to the general public, how you have laws, and whether you're a practitioner or whether you're incarcerated or whether you pay taxes. We're all kind of affected by whether you have to get a driver's license or whether you have to pay insurance. There's ways that the legal system impacts you ridiculous. And as you've kind of mentioned, be it regulation or lobbying or acts or executive orders or even elections, for dare I say elections, it's important to kind of keep in mind that this critical race theory may be just a theory, but we see some manifestations of the impact of racism even wherever we look, whenever we go to sleep or whenever we wake up. What was the next workshop that you attended?
The next panel was fantastic.
Or panel, rather.
It was Queer of Color Politics.
Mm-hmm. Queer of Color Politics.
And it really talked about the importance of infusing critical race theory into queer theory.
Okay.
And moving beyond the performative nature of that binary of non-conforming sexual identities. And also moving, one of the sort of reveals that Chandan Reddy posited was that we need to move beyond the idea that since we have state-sanctioned same-sex marriage, that there's actually been progress that's been made.
Okay.
And we need to move beyond the idea of queer theory as being just a way to talk about the performance of non-conforming sexual identities, but also a way to actually shift the burden of the system away from the people who are most vulnerable. So we need to actually do, in many ways, dress differently, talk differently, change up the schedule, sort of flip the script.
Well, okay, now I got to push back. Some of us might not have interpreted or understood completely more than 30% of what you just said. And Harry, I'll pick on Harry, might not have understood maybe 10%. I've understood 5%. If I'm going to paraphrase, I'm going to try to paraphrase in one sentence. Are you saying that acts of privacy should not be politicized?
I think we should move beyond that.
That we should move beyond your personal lifestyle, fashion, predilections, interests should not be stereotyped.
Well, I think that there are significant threats that to people's physical safety, economic security, their feeling of wholeness and wellness based on stereotypes. So if we allow the state to continue to homogenize or to normalize, in the essence of state-sanctioned same-sex marriage, what it is that our true identities are, the more we buy into.
Okay, so push back to me, because this is a not necessarily convoluted, but it gets back to critiquing and how you impact the system. So to recognize the difference, but not to penalize the difference.
Absolutely.
So to recognize but not penalize.
Correct.
To appreciate and not denigrate.
No, that's really. Yeah, moving beyond that binary.
Okay. Beyond the either or.
Right. So we don't need the legitimacy or consent from the state.
Okay.
To actually be who we are. So insofar that the state acknowledging same-sex marriage is a great thing.
It still seems to give the state the power.
We're still yielding a lot of our power back to the state. See,
and this is fascinating. Let's just linger on that for a second. Again, you listen to the Tom Ficklin Show, and we're talking about the critical race theory conference that was held at the Yale Law School. This is the 20th annual, but it's held every 2 years. So literally, the critical race theory, the first one, and shout out to the law school students at Yale at that time. I should have researched some of the students that were involved with the original organizers 40 years ago, and very few conferences at Yale, particularly in the law school, can kind of take place without a faculty member support or encouragement. Not to say that students can't do anything that's against the faculty desires, but most often there's a faculty member or two that really are kind of the student mentors to kind of bring things to light. So the critical race theory, but so on this point is key as we move forward in terms of blended families and transgenders and bathroom access and you just name it, and participating in the armed forces in terms of the fighting unit based on your sex. So say some more about this, about moving beyond this binary, because this is intriguing.
Well, I think that what's important to recognize is that when I speak from a position of privilege.
Okay.
Right. My lifestyle is normative. I'm white.
Okay.
I'm heterosexual. I get all those privileges, and I don't have to walk down the street or go into a business or attend a class or have a client and to wonder if they're going to judge me based on who I am as a white male. So when we're thinking about that second panel, and there was also Catherine Franke and Russell Robinson, they talked about moving outside of that binary of sexuality and gender, as well as critical race theory pushing us beyond that binary of white and black. So and I think Gerald Torres made it very clear to us that it's white on top, normative on top, and then everything is below it. And that we need to actually flip that. And we need to get outside of those binaries that really trap us into the simple ways of communicating.
That's a fascinating. I mean, that's and we hear white nationalism saying in a sense what you're just saying, that because of the threats to our being on top, we have a certain response to not necessarily liking it. We're going to respond. So it's fascinating. So say some more.
No, this actually played out last week. And we know of an individual who was working at the state legislature and actually had a state legislature say, "Hey, I need in response to this very powerful, inspiring young woman who was wearing a certain type of pin."
Yes. So let's digress. So Arvia Walker, Planned Parenthood lobbyist, she had a pin on that. Her pin said what it didn't say support Black Lives Matter. What do you call what her pin?
It was specifically, I don't know the exact wording of the pin, but it had to be about letting Black women actually lead.
Yes,
and
yes.
I stand with Black women.
I stand with Black women, and Arvia Walker and State Senator Fontana responded glibly that you should. What did he say?
That he should have his own pin saying that, support white men.
Indeed, and that's not That's not really unusual. We know that people think that, but he was a state representative before he became state senator. He has since so-called allegedly he has publicly apologized and has talked about having community meetings. But as you say, in 2018, for him to respond that way to a lobbyist, it's different if you're just in a bar or something. But for him to respond to a lobbyist and think that he could do it with impunity, and not for it to blow up, and to kind of put her in her place, whether he meant it jokingly or not. But in addition to him representing, yes, he represents part of whether he represents, as you know, many of the state senator, state representative districts kind of cover different more than one municipality. So he represents part of Hartford. He also represents part of Wethersfield. But for him to say it, be it even just glibly to a lobbyist, where Arvia is, he may or may not even know. It might have been his first time even laying eyes on Arvia, although she's been Arvia Walker from Planned Parenthood, although she's been in the state capitol many times. That's her job, part of her job description. But for him to say it glibly to a lobbyist, and whether it's even jokingly, the hurt is still there and the meaning is still there. So he has since apologized. He says he's going to have some community meetings to kind of bring this to apologize for his insensitivity. But again, it relates to this critical race theory issue.
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge that one, I know Arvia could speak for herself
indeed
on this issue. Let me speak.
And she said op-eds in the Current, by the way. Then I'll put those links up.
But I'll speak to the fragile psyche of most white males,
okay,
including myself.
I can't do that, so you got to do it.
So no, I mean, strategically, that's what we've chosen at Race, is that I'm going to be the one.
All right.
Shantae and Arlene say I have superpowers. I can go speak to white people about these issues and not experience the same risks that they do professionally and personally.
Good point.
So but it indicates how weak as an individual his psyche is and how fragile his racial identity is. And that makes him dangerous as a legislator when we know that his bias is free-flowing like that.
So whether he's on the Judiciary Committee or Commerce Committee or Educational Committee or whether he's voting on bills, you're saying that could impact his decision-making?
It obviously does. And I can't provide specific examples of the legislation that he supported, but just the fact that he felt comfortable enough in that building where they make the laws to subtly express that he's in control as a white male over a black female is the essence of institutionalized white supremacy.
Again, and I want you to repeat that because, again, just context is really important. I mean, we have the context of the Starbucks situation in Philadelphia, but in the legislative office building where people are really walking by you, they're close, and people are really listening to everyone else because it's kind of a, what are people saying? You're not spying, but you're there to kind of collect information, share information, listen, see who's moving and shaking, see who's indicating, nodding, and for him to, as you say, to feel comfortable in saying that in that public setting to a lobbyist where anyone could have been passing through, even a newscaster at that point, it's so elaborate. Even if you just repeat what you just said.
Well, so white supremacy or racism just is not the men in the white coats that burn crosses. It exists in the deepest part of every white person, and at times, if we put in the effort, we can check it. And if we get the support of people of color to actually work through those obstacles, we can then go ahead and be an active inhibitor, or we can defeat our own bias as we're working through tough, stressful times. And when we notice when white people are in those stressful situations, like up at the legislature,
indeed, good point. The context. That's right. That's
very stressful.
That's right.
That is when we
the true colors might.
Absolutely.
And your point is well taken about the stress, because if you are a state rep or a state senator, you know the people are going to be, if perhaps if not bombarding you, approaching you, and it's like walking through a gauntlet sometime. And as you say, he could have been under stress, but nonetheless for it to kind of emanate that way. And I'm looking forward to us, by the way, walking in his shoes. You know, he wants us to do that, so let's do that.
I tell you, for me, anyways, and some may think that this is radical, but this is a good time for him to choose to step down and yield his power of the position that he has to a person of color, and make sure that there's proper representation for that Hartford and Wethersfield district, because having a person in that position of power to alter or to influence legislation is the ultimate feeling of doubt and dread for a person who works actively in the community for justice and fairness.
And there have been, there was a guest editorial in the Hartford Courant to actually, as you say, request his resignation. And again, and speaking about we're talking about this Tom Ficklin Show, and Robert Goodrich is with us, and we're talking about the critical race theory conference that was held at Yale, the 20th annual. But again, law also pertains to free expression. So he's entitled to someone would argue that it's his free expression, his entitlement to kind of express his views, his wanting to be viewed as a particular person. We were talking about before about not categorizing, not stereotyping people, and having freedom of expression. So from his standpoint, his lawyer could say that he was just expressing his freedom and in his perception, and his attempt actually it's to seek and solicit empathy from another person.
Interesting point.
I thought you, and I go there. So when we go to these, when we go to when you read about Supreme Court decisions, or if you go to your Superior Court, if you go to your local court, and you see lawyers arguing about things and discussing things, and then a judge has to decide, these are sometimes not simple issues. I often suggest to people, regardless of what your ideological perspective is, or whether you consider yourself to be a Democrat or Republican, just read any Supreme Court decision, but read any Supreme Court decision where it's a 5-4 vote. We have 5 justices that decide that it's this way, and 4 decide that it's another way. That kind of indicates to you that even in terms of our most, nothing is black and white, it seems. And so 5-4 decisions at the Supreme Court level are very illustrative of where America is going, as well as when decisions get reversed, such as Plessy versus Ferguson versus Brown versus Board of Education. Let's jump. Listen again. You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show, and Robert, with the time kind of flying by, but again, you committed to coming back. I think we have 2 more panels that we might want to touch upon.
Yeah, I think that the panel 2 was about race and class, where there was again an opportunity to discuss how a fusion movement to make sure that critical race theory would not be excluded from the issues of class and the anti-capitalist movement. And that one of the interesting things that happened on this panel is that one of the, I think it was Professor Brockmeyer got up there and actually talked about the influence that white women had over the election of Trump. And that she actually, not subtly, but raised the issue of they played an important role of getting Trump elected. But we also see how important they might be. Well, she said that. I did not. That she thought that they could be important parts to leading the anti-Trump movement. And she cited some examples. That was a controversial and would have been a highly contested debate in terms of my perspective. But
let's engage it. We can engage it now with her. We'll send her the audio file and we'll ask her to respond.
No, I think that when we're trying to change systems, we have to, as Professor Torres started it off the conference, we have to be aware that are we recreating the same conditions that caused the problem in the first place? So not to say that political voice for white women should not be heard. But in this case, we should be well aware of their role in electing Trump, and that we shouldn't center the notions of white middle class femininity at the center of the resistance movement to Trump. So now,
so your rejoinder would be, I guess, to give value and credence to the Black women liberation movement.
Yeah, I think we should follow Black women.
Okay,
I think that.
And not being one myself, I mean, I can't say, but.
No, but
I'm just kidding.
Tom's got me cracking up here. No, I think that the leadership is there. The intellectual capital is there. It's about ceding power. It's about actually giving up what we have as white males and white females to black leadership.
So we started off talking about Torres, about the white icing on the cake. You saw this lady to be still substantiating that white people still need to be the baker.
Yeah, I think that it was very dangerous. It was actually, I think it was one of the contradictions that often come up in ideology or theory, and that we have to be ardent about rejecting those types of contradictions when we're talking about living in this resistance movement.
And let's give a shout out to her for making that statement in that context, perhaps even knowing that she would be, if not in the minority, that there'd be resistance. And that's the reason I love the show and I love to have you on and other folks on where, again, people may consider me to be an academic egghead, but I believe that whether you listen to my show or whether you go to school or whether your friends are in universities or colleges or at the job or at the water cooler, these issues and these ideologies and these thoughts and these philosophies and these ideas and these tensions are just ruminating like crazy. They're brewing every day. And the media, of course, helps to kind of exponentially, perhaps even disseminate this virus of poison of civil dissent. On the other hand, media can be used to kind of heal and nurture and enable us to kind of see ourselves in another person's shoes. So it's really important that we, in my mind, that I have guests on the show who are really committed to doing the work as they perceive it and being open and honest, people responding to you. So if someone has listened to something, Robert, and they want to kind of share with you a critique or a suggestion or a comment or something that they don't agree with that they've heard, how can they reach you?
Well, they can get a hold of me through our website. We have a contact sheet. You can also email me at info@race.net and address it to me, not to Arlene or Ashante. And we'll sit down and we'll be more than welcome to actually attend an event that you're hosting, have some discourse and dialogue. Albeit, I'm a former debate coach at the collegiate level, so that's something that I like to do. But it also has to have a sort of a finite, some really specific guardrails. So I'm willing to engage people on controversial issues, especially about class and gender and race.
Perfect. The next panel, if we would consider.
Yeah, I think that this was probably the most important panel for me. Okay. And we had it was titled Immigration and Imperialism, and how that imperialism is not an outward-facing dilemma anymore, and that it's manifesting itself through the new process of crimmigration, as was posited by some of the panelists.
We know about manifest. You may have heard the term manifest destiny. Often you hear, but you may not have heard the phrase recently. But we used to have this phrase that the sun never sets on the British Empire. We know about the elimination of the Quinnipiac people and the Naugatuck people and we always hear about the Arapahoes and and folks, Native American tribes in the West and the Southwest, but again, Naugatuck, Quinnipiac, Golden Hill Pegasets. It started right here. Not to mention the two casinos that
are on their lane.
But you're suggesting that this is still taking place.
Absolutely. So, as was revealed, even at a much deeper, more technical level in the conference, is that we have a state of decarceration that was really brought in by Obama and for all Malloy's critics here in even Connecticut. So that has left a void in the prison industrial complex. So there's actually not as many bodies that are being profited off of in our current criminal justice system. So what is the tides have turned, and now that even though Obama accelerated certain deportation strategies and was actually more prolific at this point, deporter of the undocumented than Trump was, but we all know about 45 and his agenda. But that now we see immigration system turning into a crimmigration, and where they're criminalizing in different ways and not observing the rights that are supposedly within this theory of liberal legalism, that everyone has rights and everyone should be afforded the opportunity of representation and bail or a jury of their peers to be. That's not happening now. So they talked about this Jennings case that was recently ruled upon, and that now they're able to hold people who are undocumented in detention facilities for an indefinite amount of time. And that there are plans now to raise those detention facilities. They're no longer considered prisons or jails, and the number of beds in there tenfold. I think they said from 40,000 up to 400,000. So now we have a whole new pool of bodies that are being marginalized and used as ways to profit off of their suffering.
And those of you that have just listened to what Robert has said, there's been a lot of conjecture as well as assertions in the media about this imprisonment of immigrants, and particularly just in terms of the bed space being repurposed, the repurposing of the bed space. So whether you agree or disagree, I really urge you and challenge you to do a little research. Email me, email Robert for more information. But this has come up. This has been repeated in the marketplace. And sometimes, yes, there is fake news, but this particular assertion has been repeated so often, one thing tends to think that it is happening. But again, challenge yourself. Ask some of you if you might have some friends that work in the court system or legal system, or your state rep or your state senator. But the repurposing of our and the redefining and the reincarceration and the recapturing and the recriminalization of some of our citizens and folks that are here due to economic and terrorism issues. It's something to really be on the alert to.
No, it's a new form of imperialism. We're witnessing it now. And shout out to the good people at Iris and Kier and Ula and the people here in New Haven that are really leading the charge to combating this recrimination of people here in Connecticut.
I really appreciate your giving the shout out to the local organizations, because go to the source. You may hear something in the news and it might sound far-fetched, ludicrous. It might be you may not want to believe it, but check out Iris. Go to other places that are involved with refugee resettlements. Even your city hall. I mean, in terms of the Puerto Rico situation, we have people that have had to come here to Connecticut. But at any rate, we're kind of winding down. I wanted to jump for a second to, again, with Robert Goodrich and the name of your organization.
It's RACE, Radical Advocates for Cross-Cultural Education.
I guess love you saying that. There was a bill that you and others were involved with. I mean, I think it was a bill that you and others were involved with at the state level that I think kind of relates to the critical race theory issue, that everything can be impacted by how we perceive the world, what our biases and prejudices and our external and implicit biases might be. And tell us a little bit perhaps about that.
So I'm standing on the shoulder of giants on this issue. So we're talking about Senator Dyson back in the 2008, 2009, 2010 era, talking about Senator Gary Winfield and Subira Gordon and her team at the Commission on Equity and Opportunity are really steadfast, and plenty of other state senators and state reps of trying to provide tools that legislators can use to measure the impact through a racial equity lens. So this year,
for every bill,
it should be for every bill.
Mm-hmm.
It should be for every bill. If we're going to be race conscious,
every that can have a racial and equity impact.
Sure. I mean, from housing to education to the funding street sweepers and economic development, commerce, public health. Shout out to Dr. Everett at HES Health Equity Solutions.
Well, Tanisha, yes, I have to get her on. I'm glad you mentioned
you got to get her on. She's I'll follow her anywhere. So,
yes.
So this issue, we actually have a racial ethnic impact statement that's in place just for limited use in the Judiciary Committee now. In 2008, it was passed into law. Unfortunately, it only deals with if a bill is going to impact the number of beds in the penal institutions here in the state of Connecticut, and it's never been used.
When you say not implemented, not enforced, not applied?
Well, during our research, my research, I tried to get a copy of any of the racial equity impact statements that the the Office of Legislative Research has produced. I was unable to find that through the legislative library.
Okay.
So finding that and realizing, wow, we have this very valuable tool for this small amount of population here in the state of Connecticut, and we don't use it. And it's not used for a variety of reasons.
Indeed.
So this year, we felt that it was necessary to introduce a bill, it's SB 256, that would allow the use of racial equity impact statements for any bill by any legislator. If requested. And that would allow us to use the ideas and tenements of critical race theory in the building of legislation that doesn't sustain current oppressive systems, but actually starts the process of liberating the oppressed and the most vulnerable in our communities through that lens.
Boy, this again, you can see why you have to be a regular guest, and bring your crew with you, some of your colleagues, because sometimes being that pioneer, we don't want the arrows to get in your back, and have some sort of protection. You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show, and as we kind of wind down, Robert Goodrich is with us, one of the co-founders of
Radical Advocates for Cross-Cultural Education.
And Robert, as we conclude, I want to give you the last word, but let's give a shout out if we can. I believe you posted something on my page. Connecticut CORE is having an advocacy day.
Yes, Issa and Kamel at CT CORE Organized Now have done some really good work here in Connecticut. And it should be recognized even more as a model of taking action. So they're going to have an advocacy day where they're not up there focusing on a specific piece of legislation, but the people that they've partnered with, like Race and myself, who have been through their year-long or multi-year process of building a racial justice platform, will get a chance to introduce their ideas and even legislation that's currently being debated, and to let people know what's band together for racial justice. And that's happening April 19th,
April 19th
at the Legislative Office Building. You can go to their website and register for
CT CORE.
CT CORE Organized .org, I believe it is. Don't be mad at me.
And they have a Facebook page.
Yep.
And do you recall what day of the week is April 13th, April 19th?
I think it's Wednesday.
But they can track that down.
Yeah, today is the no, that's Thursday, right? So what's today? Today's the 16th, so 17th.
Yeah,
so Thursday, Thursday morning,
upcoming.
10 to 3. It should be a fantastic opportunity, not just for citizens, fellow advocates, but I expect to see a lot of state reps and state senators there, because that's where the work needs to be done.
Indeed.
And if we'll see what their commitment is to racial justice by who attends. So if Senator Fanfare is still in this position, I expect him to be there to sit silently, take some notes, and be observant of what it's like to be in the resistance movement.
You're a mess. Issa and Kamel, they were honored by Quinnipiac University, the Black Law School students, with the Thurgood Marshall Award a few weeks ago. I had an opportunity to photograph that and to photo document that. Shout out to the Black Law School students at Quinnipiac, and Professor Marilyn Ford and Michael Koskoff also received an award. So it's really important. There are advocates, there are abolitionists, there are freedom fighters, there are concerned citizens, there are suffragettes, whatever word you want to use. There are people that are concerned about the state of the world, and Robert is a perfect example, and his colleagues and his band and his tribe, and whatever tribe you kind of ascribe yourself to be in, there's a time for tribal unity as well. We need tribal unity. So Robert, thank you. You're going to come back. Harry, thank you. Paul Bass, thank you. And again, you're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show, and tune in next week, and then tune in for the rest of the week in terms of WNHH. The guests and the hosts and the programs, I think, are really, really insightful from beer to food to athletics to politics. I mean, you name it, to culture, to arts. It's something worth listening to. This is a true treasure, WNHH, and we really appreciate your listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Open curtains, haters swerving cause they ain't ready for your final version. Whoa. I'm never gonna give up, fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my road, lights, camera, action, I'm ready to go. I'm never gonna give up, fall down, I just gotta get up.